So we've asked you to chat with us about breathing, and that is a giant topic of more than 20 minutes for sure. So we'll just kind of let you have at it, and then see where our conversation goes. So
Okay.
what is breathing? Why breathe? What do we do?
We breathe to live. Unfortunately, we breathe to live and play the bassoon. And I think part of that, the duality of that is what gets in the way of some of the breathing issues. But I think one of the things that I've discovered and I truly believe in is that our body is the resonance of the instrument in a very large way. Our chest and our oral cavity, particularly making sure the glottis area is alive and open, and there's no inherent tension in that. So for me, that means I have to have a body filled with air, and I think some people have confused that with a body filled with air that's just bursting to get out, but a body filled with air that's taken in a quick, physical, resonant way, that then a clearly non-rigid approach to supporting the airstream is put onto that airstream, and we can create, with the resonance of our body, oral cavity, our basic use of the embouchure, we can let the reed vibrate and we can maximize that vibration. So that's the overwhelming ideas, or overarching ideas that I try to get students to focus on. And I think in the long run, oftentimes I was just working with a student, she was in Rhode Island, and she was just working, and I says, she was doing this kind of stuff. Anytime we do that, we get into the way of our body's resonance, the shoulders I'm talking about. And she just opened up the shoulders and solved the problem that we were going to spend another 5 minutes trying to find a better fingering for, or make an issue that she's not supporting well enough. That's probably not often. Often there's a air support resonance solution to many things that we describe as an embouchure problem or whatever. So there's a lot to that. So to get to that point of resonance is really what I think you guys want me to talk about, is getting the basic support, the basic air in our body, and the basic support. For young students, I still think this Arnold Jacobs hand over your mouth to inflect, to get the sense of physicality of air coming in your mouth. You probably have all seen this before, but it's just open hand, and you want to hear the rush of warmth. You can't hear that, I assume, but it's a way to get the students to experience it's a really quick. And you see my shoulders move at the end. You didn't see you could see this whole process move instantly. I was just working with a student on I think a junior or so, and we went back to that because he was getting back into some tensional things. So why don't we just try, and I got this from Zoom from Ola Dahl the other day. He was saying do it in steps, feeling the low, hold it, come up, and so that you do feel it in your chest, and I think even more importantly that you feel it was right in here. The whole air expanse is going to come flowing out of your body without any need for support. So that's the basic core, and I think I've been going back to that this summer myself, just to make sure that can I get that with. And I feel like you have to allow a little more time for that to occur, not to add tension before the breath is completed. That's the other big thing. So I sometimes find I get ready to go, and this isn't really filled up with air. So I think that filling up our resonant factors of our body is really important. So what gets in the way? I think what gets in the way are myriads of things, but a lot of it is old habits of the students. What else is new? But it is also the sensation that for some reason we want to truncate, what I call truncate the breath, and you can hear it. We're stopping it. What is that? It can be physicality here. I think very often it's just closing off this glottis with that kind of feel, and we've destroyed the resonance chamber. So I think that's one element that gets in the way of the breathing. The other element that gets in the way of the breathing, like I just alluded to, was for some reason, people say, well, that's enough for me. I don't really need to take a full breath. I'm just going to go ahead and play. So we just stop here, and it never gets to our chest, and certainly never gets to. So I think it's training the students to realize one thing, that we need to have this physical, continuous, athletic, whatever you want to call it, and it can happen very quickly. I think that's what a lot of students don't realize. So it takes a while to experience that, but I think when students actually experience that complete breath without truncation somewhere, that then we can start to speed that process up. Within the daily routine, within every scale I play, you've got to beat them over the head. The students have to insist on, by beating themselves over the head, that they're going to have some sort of clarity of breath before they start a scale, start anything, start a piece. So, great. You've done that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So what is that? You said it starts out, obviously, as a slower process as you're getting used to kind of filling up with that much space, and then it speeds up kind of over time as you get more accustomed to it. Do you have like a methodology for speeding up students do that? Like turn on a metronome, set X number of beats?
I try to get students to turn on the metronome, and this is where the trust of students lets us down, I think. I don't think there are a lot of students going click, click, oh, I got it, or click, click, really trying to breathe on the impulse of a breath. As a lot of us realize, I think oftentimes we use breathing within a playing situation to create an ictus for an ensemble to come in, or your collaborator to come in. So we need to keep focusing the idea that breathing should be on an impulse, or some subdivision of an impulse, I think. So that is very often what helps me stay focused, particularly in an orchestral context. Not that I'm trying to bring in the whole orchestra with me, but that I'm just trying to make sure I'm with the orchestra's impulse as I perceive it, and we can have that impulse is starting to get us into the rhythmic flow, the pulse center, if you want to call it that, of the group you're with. So, yeah, so I try to get students to speed it up very much so. That was going to be my next statement, was that's easy to do. All this stuff is great. You can take a million first breaths and you can rule the world. But now you've got to take a great breath, or at least a calculated breath, in the interior of a piece of music. And I think that's really the difficulty of it. And so I think here's where two things come into play. We have to, there's other things I like to insist on with students, that we're relaxed with our abs when we breathe. That's very important. That you feel like you're breathing all around your body. You can pretend that you're breathing you have another mouth at the back of your neck. It can help you find that relaxation. That's a Morelli-ism, I believe, that breathing from the small of your back. Very helpful. Triggers. All the students need to find those kind of triggers. So we need to find that trigger in the middle of a piece of music where you've at the end of a breath, and then you're making a release, and then you're going to come in tom, tia, tia, tom. It's easier to do singing than playing the bassoon, I realize, but there has to be that same physical, explosive quality in those interior breaths. That's where I think we fall down mostly. That's where I fall down. And I tell my students, you've got to practice your breathing. And I think they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I think it's those elements of the breath before, the quickness. How much time do you have? You have an eighth note at 112. That's not very much time. That doesn't mean we can get our mouth as big as we want to, but we're just relaxed. And we have this ho. I tend to use a ho or how syllable. How helps me round out my embouchure when particularly if I have a quick release and I get to a how. Helps me find some sense of focus with the embouchure a little easier than just my generic symbol of ho to keep this all open. So what gets in the way of that? Practice. But the other thing that really gets in the way with it is how we release the sound before the breath. I think everybody seems to be aware of that. I was working with another student a few days ago. He was sounding great. He's trying to play the Bach A minor flute partita, and he's doing a great job. All these leaps, and then every other breath sounds like it's a screech, high voiced breath. So we need to be listening. There's always some sort of listening component the quality of that, the openness of the sound that we make when we breathe, but particularly the sound of a breath that we make after the sound of the breath, particularly after a quick release. Is it high? Is it going to have a he value? Is it a hey value? What does that mean? It means lots of things. The glottis could be closed down a little bit. The tongue is arched and not at the voicing that we need. Well, what does that tell us? I think that tells us that's how they made the release just before the breath. So we have to work on a quick release that doesn't include the even if it's not there already, but that does not bring in the factor of tension here, and certainly not by raising the back of your tongue to stop the airflow. So we have to get the embouchure to be, we have to, I think, here's some more support issues, but we have to be really using low support with the release factor so we can keep the intensity, not lose the airspeed, at the pitch level, so we don't go too crazy tight. So I'm not sure if that was clear enough with that, but that's the issue. You see, we take a quick breath, but we have to take a quick breath from relaxation. Make any sense?
Yeah, definitely. So when you get into, you mentioned support, and I think a lot of times when we talk about breathing, that immediately goes into, you need to play with the supported sound, support your airstream, but that's such an ambiguous concept that I find that a lot of people don't really know what that means. You just sort of send like this energy out into the void and think, now I'm supporting. Or you clench up like you're going to get punched in the stomach. You know, I've heard that a number of times. Or you push out, like, and there's a lot of kind of confused musculature. So what is support?
Yeah, I agree. There is a lot of, and I think, I enjoy pedagogy. I enjoy trying to get some of pedagogic ideas across the students, but also for the student to develop their own sense of pedagogy. Sometimes I feel like when we're in the area of breathing, we get to a certain element that I think there's a context of what the performer feels like, and it may be not exactly what I would call a pedagogy, but it's a feel. This is field work for the student. So, for that I mean, I feel like, because I don't want to claim this is the only way to support the sound, but I feel like that when I take backing one step further, my whole goal is resonance of body. So when I take this full breath, and then my next step in the support is to let this expand, let this decrease, and then we add some tension. I've just lost a depth of sound that I would have enjoyed if I hadn't squeezed in, right? So there's that layer. So that's what led me to the fact that let's at least push away from my core, and I think it's more than just this way. This is where I think I've been wrong many times with students. Push away, push away. You can't push. You can't push up. Some students are doing a very good job of pushing out and away. Some students are doing a very good job of pushing down and away. And I think I've been exploring more with when I'm playing in the low register. It's mostly these lower muscles. And it's mostly obliques pushing this way. I think we need to focus on obliques to get the sense. I think this is another Morelliism that we feel like we're supporting all the way around our body. And I think that's crucial. And that for me means low. It doesn't mean I'm taking a breath and then I push in. So for me, that is not the way to support. For me, the way to support is, you can barely see it, but I'm pushing these muscles out in a certain context, in a outward, downward, whatever way that doesn't go in. How much? How much do we support? Nobody knows. It depends upon the context of the reed that we've got dealing with, maybe the resistance of the instrument. This student, yes, my student is tight in the upper register, and he's got all that resistance. So we need to make sure we're minimizing that resistance where we can. The reed is functioning at a pretty decent level, multiple crows, etc. And then you can start to gauge how much air support you really want to be pushing at the reed. I do think it is much more, I think there are lots of stages that students learn this. I think students learn it basically in that's a lot more than I anticipated, and that's just good enough for the bottom octave. So I think what students don't realize very often is that just like the flute, we need to overblow at each octave, as the flute can overblow and get all the upper partials for their sounds and blah blah blah. We can't really hear that as well, but we have to do that. If we go from low G to middle G, I want to feel like I'm engaging more. I go to high G, I want to feel like I'm engaging more, and I feel more intensity of the airstream. And that for me is all about pushing away in a relaxed, non-rigid way, and that's when as soon as students can figure out there's no rigidity in that process, then they can realize they can be artful. This is an art. I think this is finding to create, or at least it's a really refined craft of trying to figure out how you support the thing. And I think so as we find, well, that doesn't work too much. I really feel like I'm just compressed here, or all I'm thinking about is my stomach, and I need to think about my whole body. What's the key to the whole key for me over the last few years? As I've aged, I've shrunk. And it's a sad, sad thing to see me shrink. So, but what has convinced me is that our posture is the key to it all, and that if I'm up, my head is floating, I feel like my shoulders are open, and I've added, because I think I am starting to do this, I've added a component that helps a lot of students to feel like you're just, I'm not saying do this, I'm saying slightly arch, open your back. And that gives me, I think it's a known concept, I think physically, that the shoulders are the gateway to the muscle uses throughout our upper body, and the tension occurs mostly in our shoulders, and it radiates out to other parts of our, but if this can be opening and floating, and I can do all of that without losing the sensation of what I call floating, or that it's not this gridded, I'm picking up 450 pounds of weight. So there's never that concept. One thing I'll add to this, if you want to go on to something else, is that you have to somehow figure out how to do some of this before you play a note. So I think as Mr. Dahl has he takes his breath, he wants you to feel the note. He has this kind of process going on in what I've read and seen with him, and that's getting the air to hear. For me, I don't quite understand what his concept of means. That makes me tight, so I'm not buying that. But it's the idea of getting air to. So I have my students make what I would call a firm, stern face. Get all those lips there. Use all of your facial mass to get to that point. Then you can and the student can then start to, if this is my mouth, this is the air. The student can start to experiment with. Here's 140 pounds of air, blah 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 per square inch, or here's 80, or here's 100, or not, or whatever. I can't go down. 70. Here's 60. So he can figure out what we need for the setting of a given note, and it's never 400 pounds. It's going to have. If this isn't out of the way, we can figure out I need for a nice open rich middle G, and we might need something totally different for a nice low supported piano G. It's going to be a very lower support. It's going to be probably actually less volume of air through there, but that creating that intensity. What the hell is intensity? I think intensity is when we use the obliques pushing this way, maybe in a slightly downward way, and it's not an outward push of the, this is where I think we're not moving out. I think when you're yelling, hey, yelling through there using an outward burst, I call it a stage whisper. When you're using your stage whisper to project through a stage and say, hello, you're using low abs, you're using obliques to create that openness here, but to create that spin of air. That's what I think, what I call the old guys call spin. Use some spin. Spin the air through there. What the blazes is spin? So I'm not quite sure. It's a concept that I think helps us engage with all these things we're just talking about. So it has its function of, you need to spin in the air. You need to pretend there's a ping pong ball on the top of your bassoon, and you can just keep the ping pong ball hovering above your bassoon with spin. I'm not really negating that concept. I have my jovial self going here, but that spin for me needs, as a pedagogy, needs to be understood as a physicality, I think. And that can have to do a little bit more now. We haven't talked about it, but how we kind of voice the airstream, how we can kind of get it maybe more in our, what I would call head voice, like singers do, or is it more of our chest voice? All these things are part of this process that and then allows us to, okay, how am I going to get the air across to the reed? To, ta, ti, tie, some syllable, but maybe there's another layer of engaging the head voice. I think that's a little bit probably of getting the soft palate. It is getting the soft palate more engaged, or opening a little bit more, getting the oral cavity maybe just a little bigger. It seems less precise to me, and you have to trust kind of the sensation of what you're doing in there. But so I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, so it just reminds me of if you're thinking about different size tires. Like you've got truck tires or like little tiny road bike tires, and all of them have a valve, and there's always space in the valve. But when you kind of press or you take the cap off, there's air ready to come out. But the faster air and the higher pressure air doesn't necessarily come out because the valve itself is restricted. It's because there's more air compressed inside a smaller space.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like you just said, it's the pressure behind that valve. And I think that I've always been confused about water hose. Airstream is like a hose of water, and you just put your thumb over it, and it gets more pressure. Well, what's the thumb in my mouth doing?
I think there's a big issue with that analogy, right? Because if you're using in that analogy, the water is always the same coming out of the house, and you change your thumb across the Airstream, which would be what, maybe your throat, your embouchure. Exactly.
So yeah, but those are all concepts people were using at the time, and there are lots of wonderful players within a couple of generations before mine that were instinctive, and there's this other aspect we haven't really talked about in terms of just the physicality of playing, and that's that just there are students that are just at ease with their body. They're at ease. There's this kinesthetic awareness that you don't even need to talk about, and things just happen. There's no tension as we go. So a lot of this, and I mean this very seriously, a lot of this takes very much a sensitizing of the student to his or her own body, and that's somewhat a tricky thing to do within the context of one-on-one relationship as a teacher. But over the years, I've really decided I've got to be talking about those issues, and so for me, it's always using the word reflect. We have to reflect on how we did that, how it felt. Did you feel any tension somewhere? Or did you feel like you couldn't compress your muscles anymore, or activate your muscles anymore? So that's an important issue that has to be developed soon, and it's something that's not always perceivable from at least from my viewpoint as a teacher if we ever do this again, a teacher in the same room with the student. But I think it's very important. But the term reflection is crucial to all of this, and we all know that. Reflecting on how we practice, reflecting on what that breath was like, and so it's always this engagement of reflection and forward. I think you can wallow in reflection, thinking you're achieving something, but you got to reflect. That was, but it becomes the process of flow through the body, flow of decision making, flow of the thought process of the concept of pre-thinking the flow of musical ideas and how that works. But it has to begin with reflection, and it has to begin with everyone's concept of engagement. I think so many students, there's still a lot of, and I'm sure I was that way to a certain degree when I was young. Come learn me something about the bassoon, Mr. Patterson. Well, maybe there's this engagement with this instrument that you need to do more, so you're setting yourself up for a base knowledge that we can modify and amplify. So I think there's always that level of, what do you know about the Vivaldi E minor concerto, so I don't have to look at the score. Those kinds of things are still involved in what we're talking about here. There's a willingness to accept what they're doing and not realize they have to be engaged in this process in a different way. That's the art of it, I think.
No, that's great. I was wondering if you might also talk about your process of setting. When I studied with you, we did a lot of breathe, set, play, and that really revolutionized my playing. Is that something you would address in terms of support?
In terms of sitting?
Oh, no, just in terms of general bassoon support, the set process, yes.
I know that's a hard one. I think that's a hard one not to encourage. So we were just talking about we want to breathe. And now how do we get that ready to go without introducing this? For me, and I've gone away from that, but I'm starting to come back to it. But for a long time, I would breathe, put the tongue on the reed, blow against the reed, let go of the reed, so that there was no possibility, I would hope, that the air would get stuck with kind of at some level that we're using this glottal area to close it. So some students react well to that, some students don't. Maybe I'm being less pedantic about my approach than I used to be. I'm not sure what the issue is. But I've gone to more what I want the students, if we can entrust this open posture, I'm using this concept of feel. And I think it's more like you're just about to start a sit-up. You know, we've taken this breath. There's no tension in the breath. I'm taking a breath. Now I'm going to start this sit-up. I don't really mean you have to lean forward to do that, but you're just engaging those muscles, but you're not engaging them so hard that they create this tension. So I'm trying to get students to what I call this feel, this engagement, engage, and then there's another layer of actual what I would call support that creates enough energy to get the air through there. From my perception, I think that's what Dahl is trying to accommodate. I think in some of what he's doing, he might be a little more precise and more. It's ready to go right at the moment. And that's also helped me to realize I have a lot. I watch and listen to a lot of European players because they're just more available in a lot of ways than American players. But you know, there's a lot. I want the student to be on the reed before this is going on. However quickly, reed, tom, no, da, no, tom. So that little split second of difference, so you can feel the reed. Richard Dean is one of the associate or principal horn in New York Phil. He was at Brevard Music Center for several years. He put out a book, and he wants the students to taste every note before they play it. So I want to taste it. I want you to not hopefully that it's a 44-old day reed. You can taste the reed, but you can taste the process. You can feel like you're ready to go with that. So that's the trick. I think that if all of this processes we're talking about today, that is the ultimate process that we need to figure out. And so two things. We need to keep working on that, right? How much engagement do I need? I need more engagement than maybe in the top register than I do in the bottom, but I want to make sure that I don't move my jaw when I do that. As I'm tasting the reed, I'm feeling how much openness do I need? Maybe that may be on the reed a little bit more, depending upon your embouchure approach. High register may be on the reed just so slightly more that I feel like the reed is helping, my embouchure is helping me with that process. And so oftentimes we need this quick relationship to the reed. If I'm going to play the Rite of Spring, it's going to be like that. But if I'm going to play Marriage of Figaro, maybe it's not. I don't think we need that. I think we want something a little more precisely of the music that we're dealing with. And oftentimes, like we were talking earlier about the secondary breaths within the music itself, we don't want to waste a millisecond thinking, I got to feel the reed. Ludwig says feel the reed. I can't take you've got to just let go and make it happen. But I truly believe that process of immediately playing on the reed is from many years of breathe, feel, and we're understanding that process in a slow regimen. You can take it too far, and you can get the process too pulled apart. But I think it's pretty easy to get the process tighter and tighter, so you can feel like plenty of time for the breath. Here's my feel and set, and we go. So.
That's awesome. I really like the taste the note before you play it.
You should hear this guy play. I would sit in front of him that's the softest blanking thing I heard in my life, and I got to come in right next to him. He was just fantastic. He's got a very interesting book. He talks about using the glottis, and he talks about stopping a little bit of this area before play, but the anathema for horn or wind players or brass players is stopping the airflow, creating some sort of tensional process, and it should be for us as well. That's why I like the sense of feel of engaging, and we go. So
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. We could talk forever about breathing and support and voicing and things. In the interest of everyone's sort of rest of their morning, is there anything else that you just have a burning desire to share with us?
Oh, I think we've covered it pretty well. I have my little list of things, my pedagogy overview. I think if there's anything, if there's anything about all this, is just that we need to realize it's a sequence, and that we can't miss. If there's anything right or wrong in your playing, it's this. You played the Mozart, you put an accent on the wrong note. That's a wrong way to play Mozart. No, it's not the wrong way. It's your opinion about how to play the Mozart. But with this, I think for the context that I'm trying to get within my playing, if I don't start in this way, I'm behind. You know what I mean? I'm behind in my breathing, behind in my support. So I think this is the point where sometimes you can kind of fudge. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. But right here, everything's got to come into congruence, and it's got to work. So I think that's the reason to spend within the practice concept in the practice concept 5 minutes, even if all the students are worried about how much time to spend on things, or they don't have time for long tones, or we got to learn blah blah blah. So 2 minutes of attacks, or maybe just 2 minutes of just getting to 2 minutes of exercises without the bassoon, to 2 minutes of an attack. I've started doing something where I'm starting in an open F and I'm doing just a breathe, my setup, and then I'm using 3 different syllables: T, te, ta, te, ti, just to make myself physically be aware of that. And within that, for me, I'm starting to make sure I'm going to go on the reed a little bit, I'm going to pull out a little bit. You can't see it. It's all within the embouchure concept that I'm using, where I'm getting more forward in my embouchure or more backed away and more cushioned in my embouchure. So it's just putting those things in that combination. And I still believe that if we do 50 minutes of practice, if we do 2 minutes, 3 minutes on 5 or 6 different things, and we do those every day over different combinations of notes or concepts or whatever, it's much better than just, oh, I got to do some long tones, I got a lesson tomorrow. So that's obvious, but it's not real life, I think, for a lot of people. It takes another layer of discipline in our students that they've got to be dealing with this. And I think that's the successful students. Often I wonder, how are students going to, I have to get everybody a job. Well, what's wrong? Why? What's going to happen to blah 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 if they don't get a job? How does this whole process get weeded out? How do the students weed themselves out? And I think right here is part of why students weed themselves away from being a success. They don't spend the time with these kinds of things, or myriad other ways. But I think there is that self-discipline and awareness. But if we give them what we were just talking about, a real clear approach and lots of pedagogic clarity to it.
Yeah, you and I just spoke about this a couple of days ago. Like at the end of the day, it's about control. Right? Are you making the sound that you want to make? And then if it's not the sound that somebody else wants you to make, then that's your interpretive differences or your opinions.
Yeah.
But are you able to do what you say you're going to do?
Right. And the other thing we didn't talk about too much, and we can go, but is listening. There are elements of listening we can do with all of this basics that we're talking about. We can listen to the quality of the sound. We can listen to the air coming into my body. We can reflect on other things, but there's always that core of listening is, oh, that first attack was junk. Well, you didn't notice that you went gahunk or you went gahunk as you made the attack. And so it's the listening. Everybody says it. Use a mirror, use a metronome, but you got to listen at what you're looking at and comparing yourself to. So you've got to listen to them. I mean, you got to listen to what you're looking at. And I think that students sometimes are a little bit taken aback at how great they look, and they miss the initial point of contact with the reed, or their mouth wasn't open, or they're breathing with their lips protruding because Mr. Ludwig said a whole breath, and ho is like that. No! I am one funny guy. Isn't it great?
I love it.
I miss it. I gotta be honest. I miss it.
Well, I miss you too, both of you. And I was just telling Cayla that I admire your energy. During our times here, I'm trying to stay active, and it's doing pretty good. But after a nice long walk with Lucy, it might be time for another coffee and read the paper. You guys are doing interviews. I'm jealous.
Well,
Good for you.
Thank you.
I'm serious. I'm serious.
Thanks. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
Oh, and we appreciate you talking with us. It's so good to, no matter where you are kind of in your learning process, you can always get some good from coming back to things like this every day, all the time.
I mean, until you're Richard Dean and playing in the New York Philharmonic, I guarantee you that's how he begins his day.
Well, and I bet he still is. I mean, he's.
I'm saying it's
Yeah. It's not because he arrived at that point or any of us have gotten where we want to be that you stop doing those things.
Exactly. I mean, he's gotten there with that process, and everybody, bassoonists included, they're all are focused at some level on what works for them. This is my ideas, and similar to what you teach your students, I'm sure. These are our ideas, and if followed, they can be fruitful. They can get you to an artistic level, and if anything, will end on, we're doing this so we can have some sort of artistic level. And the artistic level, oftentimes the mood, the color of sound is often about the attack. It's often about the depth of sound. It's often about changing of sound. None of that is available to us unless we have our body's resonance or oral cavity's resonance available to be utilized and to be understood by an audience. So.
Absolutely.
Okay, I got to go practice.
Okay. Well, give Lucy a good scratch for me.
Okay.
Oh, hello, sweet girl.
Yeah.
She looks very distraught by this whole conversation.
Yeah, she looks. Yeah.
She's my teaching partner.